narcissist, you will notice that they have this tendency to want to bring attention back to themselves in good ways or in bad ways, right? So whatever way they find. So they will have to learn that, okay, it's not just my life that is happening, parallel lives are happening, like all of us. Like if you and me are communicating right now, I know Kartikeya also has his own life and there's own complexity to it. So if someone, if two people are choosing to be in a relationship, they're choosing to attune to every part of each other's life. It's not going to revolve around one person.
To be honest, when I started doing meditations and all, I've been on this path long time, I didn't even know the word narcissist. But in last 3-4 years, it's become so common and it's become part of my vocabulary as well.
If AI is going to take over all the things you are deriving your ego based on, what is going to be left? It's going to be your consciousness. It's going to be how you regulate your emotions. It's going to be, do you know how to make, relationships happen? Do you know how to connect with people? Do you have a heart which is kind? Do you have all of the soft skills and all of the humane skills and all of the consciousness elements that we humans have? The narcissist person is going to love bomb you. They're going to convince you are the entire world to them. You are the person they've met. They're going to convince you to marry them within a year or so. Extreme things happen in those scenarios. In the initial 3 months, it will be just literally love bombing or something like that. And as a result, empath gets convinced and it's like, wow, this person is just exactly the person I wanted to have in my life. And the moment the empath falls for them and falls in love and has that attachment built with them, that very moment the empath will will be in a position, okay, but that very moment breadcrumbing will start. So the narcissistic person will start pulling up a little bit, so it will be like, okay, you are good, but this, it's like pulling love away so that the other person becomes even more addicted, so it's like, okay, so they will give you just enough to keep you around, but not enough to make you feel loved, or in fact they will potentially make you question yourself if you are a good person in the first place as well. So this is how it works out. It happens because of intense attraction, intense passion, because both of them are needing medicine from each other, which specifically narcissist doesn't have to give. So that's why the cycle repeats. Now, in this scenario, what will happen is empath will always keep thinking that the person they are is such a good person because of what they showed me in the initial phases, and they want to see the good in this person, the person who is showing narcissistic traits and everything. Mm-hmm. And since they are so focused on seeing that good within them, and they're so wanting to be loved and give them love and everything, they will actually end up staying longer. And it gets even worse if they start thinking that I have to fix them, I have to save them. Maybe they get into a cycle where they think, okay, I will only when I love them enough, they will love me back. If only I give them more gifts, they will also be nice and kind to me. Not realizing, why do you have to convince someone else to be nice and kind to you? If they're not nice and kind to you, just leave the relationship.
I feel like everybody is stuck in these.
That's what, right? I think we are all on the spectrum of narcissism. Question is where, right? So you can be extreme, because I think as kids or as teenagers, we were potentially very narcissistic because we lived in our own world and we didn't care about other people. We were like, okay, this is my world. I live the way I live. What I say is right, but the other person thinks is wrong. So we do have a bubble around us, most of us, right? But the question is, how frequently do we question ourselves? And are we there do we have the capacity to attune to other people? Do we have the capacity to empathize and be someone else's shoes and realize how my actions might be hurting the other person?
You think some people just don't have that ability, and then they're not narcissistic, then that's a bit not healthy at all. But someone, let's say, who's coming from that space, but they are doing the work to become conscious and start becoming empathetic, and then they're breaking their layers, what's your take on this?
I would say that I think people do become empathetic over time in most scenarios. It's not like it's a thing which can't be changed. But the question is, how deep is the trauma? Or sometimes it can also be, when it comes to disorders, psychological disorders, it can be a very genetic thing. Narcissistic personality disorder, borderline personality disorder, bipolar disorder, a lot of disorders. Cluster B disorders are basically personality disorders which do have certain roots in, they have trauma associated with them most of the time, but they do also have genetic influences and all of those things. So yeah, in some scenarios you can't fix everything, right? But can you become a more kinder person? I think everyone has that capacity. It's more about putting in the effort and and if we see from a biological point of view, empaths actually have more mirror neurons in their brain compared to someone who is not that empathic. Mirror neurons are what?
What does that mean?
I'll just explain to you. For example, you and me are sitting. We will notice when you lean in, I also potentially lean in. Or if you do something, I also mirror you back, right? So this is the function basically of mirror neurons. What it does is that, we attune to the environment. So that is, now we are able to see each other. But what has been noticed in research is, even if we are sitting in the same room, and if you and me know each other well, we will, even if we are not looking at each other, we will still attune to each other's body language or each other's way of speech. Like, I remember I really liked this girl in my college, and I thought she's so amazing and she's so empathetic. And within few weeks, I realized I started talking like her. Like, I'm literally like talking as if it's not my voice, it's her voice, because I was kind of mirroring her because I admired her so much. Right? This is one scenario I've noticed happens with a lot of people. So now what happens is, when you are attuned to people and when you are genuinely attuned to people's energy, you would start mirroring them, and that's the function of mirror neurons. Now, people who are little less empathetic would have less mirror neurons, which means I can be literally having this dead stare into your eyes, and I can see that you are leaning. I can see that you have a question in your mind, but I can choose to distance myself, not trying to understand what's going on with the other person. And that's exactly what empathy is at the end of the day, right? Trying to understand what is going on with other person, what are they sharing, what are they saying, what are they trying to express, and all of those things. So yeah, that's the difference.
It's a deep one. It's a deep subject, because it's like, the empath ends up being so much with the narcissist only again and again until they learn their lessons. But then at the same time, the narcissist is also learning something from them, because it's a mirror. So what are they learning? One, and how is the change happening in them? That's one question. And then the disorders you talked about, through therapy, through all these spiritual work, are people able to, let's say, if they start arriving in very strong awareness states, you can call them enlightened states. I'm not saying they're enlightened, but they're arriving in those states of like shunyata. And like, what is these mechanisms then start doing to a person with deep traumas, narcissism, and disorders, all this kind of stuff?
Okay, addressing first to the first question about narcissism, that what are the lessons they learn. First of all, it's not a given that they will learn the lesson, and that's the classic trait of narcissism, that you would actually not want to. You will be convinced that there is nothing wrong with me. Very frequent that if the empath and a narcissist decide to end the relationship, narcissists often are the first one to move on and right away enter into another relationship, showing the empath that it was always you who had something wrong happening. Like, oh, you were the wrong one, I was always right. So the entire point.
This is a narcissist. What you are describing is a narcissistic personality disorder, not traits of narcissism.
Yes. Majorly, the more high you are on the narcissism spectrum, the more signs that you will show these kind of symptoms. But this is not written out, like, it's not like this is how it is. It would always be, right? So if you have narcissistic traits, then you can evolve out of them, right? Just like we evolved out of them.
I'm talking more about people with higher narcissistic traits and people with higher empathetic traits, and them having a relationship where their empathetic traits are becoming more empowered, and their narcissistic traits are coming down to then becoming a more empowered person, right? So that's what I'm talking. Because narcissistic personality disorder, I think, is very, very hard to change, as you said. So I'm talking more like, because I think a lot of the generalized relationships, people are more in these loops, not necessarily like the narcissistic personality loop, because that one is you need to get out of.
I agree, and I understand your question. Makes sense. So in terms of what the narcissistic person is potentially learning in the relationship is usually emotional attunement. So they would usually first of all, narcissists, you will notice that they have this tendency to want to bring attention back to themselves in good ways or in bad ways, right? So whatever way they find. So they will have to learn that, okay, it's not just my life that is happening. parallel lives are happening. Like all of us, like if you and me are communicating right now, I know Kartikeya also has his own life and there's own complexity to it. So if someone, if two people are choosing to be in a relationship, they're choosing to attune to every part of each other's life. It's not going to revolve around one person. It's not always going to be someone taking the energy and not giving back, right? So emotional attunement is one thing. Second is narcissists actually have a very fragile ego most of the time. It might seem out because of the tough exterior that they are so
They are very
egoistic.
fragile. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, they have
So
very deep traumas.
yeah, absolutely deep traumas, and also they have this feeling that since I'm not good enough and since I can't be fixed or whatever that is, let me develop this barrier so that I just never have to be vulnerable, because the moment I get vulnerable, people will not be kind to me. It's very common to have this belief within themselves. So as a result, they can't be vulnerable. If you can't be vulnerable, very high chances you can't form a relationship with someone, because you are gonna there's gonna be a barrier. So they are learning to embrace, if they're learning to emotionally release as well. Very common that someone who has more narcissistic traits, they don't remember when they cried the last time. They don't remember when was the last time they actually felt emotion, like really felt it, not just thought about it. So a lot of unlayering happens for them, and they actually have to attune to their inner child, which so many times they are potentially disconnected from to an extent. They don't even have childhood memories or something like that. Now, it doesn't mean everyone who doesn't have childhood memories is a narcissist, but just one of the traits can be, kind of prevalent there. So they're just emotional intimacy, if we can say, is what they're learning. If two people exchange energies in any way, if two people have communication in any way, do they have the capacity to open their heart and really listen to them and not make it about themselves in any way, either in a good way or in a bad way? That's what. So having the capacity to hold space. So these are things they can actually learn from an empath, but then empath, when they're not empowered, they actually end up teaching them the opposite, because they convince them that if you're vulnerable, you will not have boundaries. As a result, you will harm themselves, and as a result, narcissist thinks I'm better off than them, because see, look what they are doing also. So yeah. So it's a learning cycle which has to really happen. It can't, with narcissists, they actually have to do deeper work because they are disconnected from their emotions in the first place.
Yeah, it's deeper work.
Yeah.
How do you work with clients where you notice they have this and they want to do the deeper work? Like, how do they, like, what positive results? Because I want to also focus on the healing and positive side, and for people who break out of the loops and the spirals, and how do the healing mechanisms and all get people out of these things. Because I personally have had many traumas and all of this stuff, like deep stuff. But through these modalities, through these understandings, I've been able to heal a lot of those things and change a lot of spirals and loops and everything, basically, my whole life. So there's a lot of power in these mechanisms and spiritual sciences and all this stuff, right? So how would you share that for somebody, let's say, because I see it this way, like I see it things in a more, you can say, from a consciousness perspective, where everything is kind of like a game, like we're in a simulation. And if you truly start awakening, like you truly are coming in a more consciousness state, you're becoming just like indifferent to everything, in a way where you're attuned to everything, but you're becoming indifferent to everything, where you can be in a war as well, or in a room in Delhi, but your inner state will more or less stay the same. Or if not stay the same, you will be able to just observe it, like what monks are able to do in a very high state of consciousness, right? So in that state, you're neither a narcissist person or an empath person is going to get to you, because you're kind of you're just in you're in so from and this is the space that brings immense healing, because it's like you don't need love from anybody else, you don't need to give to feel validation, you don't need to save anybody else to fill a void in you, you don't need to get an attention for your ego to feel something inside you or to hide something behind you. So like this is a very empowering spaces to arriving in, which is kind of what you, with your work, you're trying to bring people into, right? So can you share like the mechanisms, or what initially somebody can hear, or your words, what triggers can we provide to them, just from this conversation, that they can take a step forward in this journey?
I really love that.
It's all about self-realization. If you realize that you start realizing the consciousness, then you automatically start breaking out of the spirals and loops inside you.
Makes sense, and I think I completely understand from where the kind of I really understand what you mean when you ask that question and how you want it to be more accessible for anyone to be able to pick up from there. There are two sides to it. First is that things cannot be in most of the scenarios. The things will be very individual when it comes to working with someone who has narcissistic tendencies because of very very unique childhood experiences. That is one. But that being said, there are so many things that can be worked upon most people that I'll share now. So that is, for example, I think if I were to summarize, a narcissist should let themselves let their ego die, whatever way and form that comes in. Now that's a theoretical statement to say. What I mean by that is very common, not always, but let us say a narcissist has more of a fight response. Like they get angry the moment something triggers them outside of themselves, and they are pretty sure that they're right about it because anger to them is like it shows that this is something I care, whatever that is, right? So they're sure that their anger is justified there. In that scenario, we will kind of reflection and self-questioning is number one thing we would potentially work with them. So self-inquiry in a way that are you sure you're really right about it? That is one thing. And then noticing, is anger like a mask you wear so that you can't actually feel sad? So for example, if we were to see a iceberg, when we see so the top layer, if anger is the top layer, what is within it that the anger is not letting you see? So if a very conscious thing is, it's very common for people who have anger issues to actually have anger as the right away reaction because they don't want to be sad and vulnerable. We would love for some exactly, grief. So now in that scenario, so let us say if they think that being sad means I'm going to be vulnerable, I'm going to be weak, I'm going to be whatever that story is for them. So number one practice would be a therapist or someone who has the capacity to hold space for them while they're going through deeper emotions than anger, right? So first of all, what is anger trying to hide in the first place? And once they know it, do they have or potentially even giving them ways to be able to deal with or to be able to feel the emotions which are lying underneath the anger. That will happen in any in any case, right? For example, if their coping mechanism is to run away from situations, what are they running away from and what is underneath, and do they have the capacity to feel it? With narcissists, it is always going to come down to first connecting with their own emotions and then as a result attuning to other people's emotions. And it's very common to be in the spiritual field and be avoidant of emotions as well. I think that's a topic I really resonate with.
Talk about that. Please build on it with spiritual bypassing thing, because it's like
exactly.
I've been part of it unconsciously, but thanks to the journey that it brings out of it, this is why I'm also talking about it. But it's become too not trendy. It's become too it's become too normalized now as the spiritual path, spiritual bypassing. So that I don't think is needed to be done. So please shed light on that as well along with this.
Yes. I think we are really syncing with the conversation right now because I can really understand like where you're coming from and everything. So even with spiritual bypassing, it's very common for you to be doing all the right things, ticking all the boxes and everything that you think you should be doing to be on the spiritual path and everything, but still not feeling your emotions, and as a result avoiding them, and as a result from the outside you are the shiny beautiful person who does all the good things in the world and such a moral person, saintly person, but on the inside, since you've never addressed those emotions, there can be a war going on which you are also not aware of in the first place. So you could be convinced with the mask as well. So that's where the work actually is, because in this time we are not living in a place where we have lack of information on what is right. We all know that you should meditate, you should exercise, you should do this. Shoulds are very clear. Question is, are we doing it in the first place? And we could very much be doing it, but are we doing it from the space of presence, or are we doing it from the space of avoidance? Avoidance would be, I think my majority of my journey was about avoidance, because I was like, okay, I don't want to feel the pain, I'll just do yoga. I don't want to, like, different kind of pain. So it was really sweet escape for me to, because I was always did not have any friends or something like that. So it was very easy for me since I was a lonely kid. Vipassana was kind of easier. The path to, kind of stay at one place for 10 days, be silent and everything came easy for me, which was amazing, and which helped me in my practice too. But over time, if I saw that to be a tendency to become isolated and not interact with people, that's where coping mechanism was, which means you have to consciously learn to question yourself. Are you doing it out of really going deeper? Are you doing it because it's easier to avoid one thing, and as a result it's going to come right back at your face in no time? So rather face it yourself instead of waiting for one day when everything is going to be, because it's not going to hide, it's going to show up. Question is, do you, consciously face it, or do you just, let it
So
slide?
what is the underneath mechanism of spiritual bypassing that is really happening?
What I feel is that, it is simply that just to keep an image in your mind of your own self, or the image that you can project onto other people, which looks good, as a result is not criticized. So if someone is very, sensitive to criticism, and if they wear a spiritual mask, how beautiful would that be? They would not be criticized because they can tell everyone, I know, I practice meditation, you know nothing. So, it's such a safe way to play, right? It can
Mhm.
become that. So that's a classic, one of the ways spiritual bypassing can happen. But I think I also feel that just like we are on a spectrum of narcissism, we are also on a spectrum of spiritual bypassing. I'm pretty sure even right now I must be bypassing in some ways, which I'm not aware of, which I will realize after 6 months and look back and see how stupid I am. So
Yeah.
yeah. So
We're
that's
all in this spiral. That's why we're having this conversation.
yeah.
We've all done it in our own ways, but the key is that we were able to guide each other home, right? That's what Ramdas said. That's why podcasts
Yeah.
are about that as well. And then this subject, this is more a societal thing, because I sometimes, you talk about death of the ego. What
Yeah.
I've understood from my experience is like, unless you become Buddha, you cannot really kill the ego, so you surrender it to God, or to whatever that brings you to that space of divinity, right? So now, from that space, what I understand is that you don't operate from the mask, or if you are operating from the mask, you right away become aware. You become aware, and you're aware. That's it. Like, you're just aware of it, and then you do something else to not do that, right? So now, narcissism traits, whatever I understand, what I understand from it, and what you said is, you are like a solo child, you have your own world, and that's it, and that's the ego formation that is happening, right? And now that ego is what is the world you end up interacting with, and that ego is what you build, and inside is like fragile. And if you touch that fragile part, somebody touches that fragile part, which happens in relationships or other
Yeah.
human relationships, parents, whatever. Whoever touches that fragile part, you go crazy. Either you fight, flight, freeze, you just run away, because it's like the ego is built on something so fragile, right? And ego will fight. It doesn't want to die. It doesn't want to be surrendered. It will play the game till it will, till like something really cuts it down, right? So now the world we are living in is just going this direction, in my opinion, because everything is becoming too much right? It's too much. Like, why narcissist? Like, to be honest, like, when I started doing meditations and all, like, I've been on this path long time. I didn't even know the word narcissism, but in last 3-4 years, it's like become so common. It's become part of my vocabulary as well. Like, I'm trying to get out of these trauma, and I've started using vocabulary of dissociation instead of trauma, or instead of narcissism. I've just started making fun of it in some ways, because it's become like so much about all this stuff, like labels, and I feel like it keeps us away from the actual part, which is like, we have to break out of these labels. We have
Yeah.
to, like, the ego is what we are actually trying to, even for the empath. Like, I don't want to be stuck in the ego of the empath, because that is also coming from a wound, right? So
Yeah.
this is what we are trying to heal. So now, from the world we are living in, where these masks are growing and growing and growing, and this is what you are basically being raised as. So narcissistic traits that we're discussing is like, they are going to become more and more prominent, actually, and you see it. Like, the more in the coming times, and already people are struggling to have intimate relationships. I mean, that's a primary indicator of this, right? So now, what to do about this? What do you see? Like, do you think this is just how it's happening and we just accept it because there's no other way, or like there is something to bring light into this so that people can become aware and they can awake and they can do the work inside themselves to not be in those masks?
I actually see, if we see from a collective lens, definitely like terms like narcissism, trauma, and all of these things have become mainstream after COVID or during COVID and all of these times, right? So we saw an upsurge of information come up. We saw an upsurge of people going to therapy and taking emotional education. Now that emotional education can also become a mask, for anyone. For example, if I know something, I might be convinced I know it, but do I feel it enough to know it? I might know that I have narcissistic traits, but I might not do anything about it, and as a result, I might remain someone who is narcissistic. But I might have another layer upon it just because I know I'm a narcissist. I'm a better narcissist now, so someone who is more aware. So there is a lot of layers to it for sure. What can we do about it? I think we are just going through. I really see things are just like you. I think you said this multiple times, and it really resonated. The spiral part, right? It's like we are in the evolution phase. I think we are in the teenage years of therapy right now, where we learn terms, we've done everything, and we are so happy about something we've learned, and everyone is interested in it and everything. But the adulthood would be actually doing the work, actually going out there and doing the work instead of being dreamy about things and everything. So actually doing the work would require us to merge multiple modalities. It would require us to first of all respect all the things which have worked in the past as well. So not be convinced that just because today we know as per the theory this is right, we should also be intuitive about what really works. We should also listen to our bodies. Yoga worked even before it was popular. It's just thanks to it being popular, more people are doing it, so it's working for more people, but doesn't mean
circus.
Now I don't think so. Not necessarily yoga, where they do yoga, it is working, but so many times people are saying they're doing yoga and it's not actually yoga. So that's a different conflict happening altogether. So I would say, but that is also a maturity point where we will realize that okay, once the teenage years of therapy and spirituality and all of the collectively will will grow out of it, and I think we will be in a place where like okay, now let's all do the work. And I think thanks to AI, we are done with information, because if I was the most informed person on earth and I was so proud of myself 20 years ago, now I am just someone who has read a lot from Instagram, ChatGPT, podcast, and all of that. So grabbing information is not cool anymore, it's good, but the real cool thing would be to actually do the work, because you can hear anything, you can take anything, you can read all the books, you can take information from anywhere. It's literally everywhere. But do you do the work is what's going to make the real difference. So, and I really love Yuval Noah's Harari 21 Rules for 21st Century. If AI is going to take over all the things you are deriving your ego based on, what is going to be left? It's going to be your consciousness. It's going to be how you regulate your emotions. It's going to be, do you know how to make relationships happen? Do you know how to connect with people? Do you have a heart which is kind? Do you have all of the soft skills and all of the humane skills and all of the consciousness elements that we humans are blessed with? So I think that's where we are heading, and I hope we are heading there, unless or I don't think we can work towards things is all I literally feel, definitely for myself.
Do you think a major awakening is kind of going on since after COVID right now?
I would say since 2017, because that was a main time for me as well. And I see a lot of anyone I talk to, when I ask them about what happened to you on what was happening in your life in 2017, they had something happening which led to them to awakening. I 100% feel a major awakening is happening. So I think informational awakening has already happened. We've all had enough information access, and all of us have become gurus and teachers and yoga teachers and everything that we can be. Now it's time to work. So I hope that next awakening is more grounding, not so airy, not so ego driven, not so cool. So I would love to be in a world where we are not doing it just because it's become another fashion to do these things, but I would love to live in a world where people are actually have a heart which is so open, and I would love to become that person myself also, for sure. So yeah, it's a lot of work to do.
But are you noticing that what you are desiring are you seeing trends around it, or?
I would say yes. I would say, but it's not the collective awakening is around currently around becoming. I think there are always few, what do we call it, leaders, right? Light leaders, if we can say them. I can see certain people who started, so people who did therapy, who gained all this information like 10 years ago to be able to share on internet today. Now they did the work, and as a result now collective is catching up with them. Now we have people who are now embodying wisdom, and we, like, there was a time when the guru culture was so prominent, and there was positive side to it, but we did enter into times when guru culture actually ruined, or gave us more trauma than doing us more good. So now I think we are turning into a place where we a lot more embodied people who are not necessarily gurus, but they're doing the work for themselves, and as a result inspiring others as well. They are coming up, so I'm hopeful, but what can I say? I'm definitely hopeful for sure, yeah.
Cool.
What do you feel about it? I'm really curious.
I thought I'm just watching the Leela, yeah. I'm enjoying it. I've become so detached from the. I'm kind of just in a state of full acceptance. Because I've seen so many different sides already of everything from my personal experiences and collective. So now I'm kind of just in a space of like listening and learning, and there's that, and just doing my own thing in my own pace, and happy with that. And I don't access information much. I do play around with AI, but in a not in an information way, more just to understand consciousness itself. Because quite a nice reflection to have. Because it's a machine, so it's like reflects all that is not machine in you, so all human. What you were saying. So I play around with AI in that regards. But yeah, I've been kind of recently just doing a lot of like empowering the empath in me, and disempowering the narcissist in me. So I'm finding the balance in me of that, which is quite a nice space, because I know how to say no now really well with kindness, and yes when I really want to say yes, not because of some other motives or something. So yeah, it's just keeping things simple, like just staying in the heart, what's the heart wants to be, and accepting life from that space, and yeah, just I think the key for me, it was always like that, but now, like, genuinely what I'm really practicing the most is that not giving any importance to stories in the head and projections of other people or whatever. Like, that is something I know they are not responsible, no matter who they are, for what's going on inside me. And what's going on inside me is completely 120% my responsibility. And if I am blaming somebody or something, whoever that may be, that's the loop I need to change. So just fundamentals, working on the fundamentals, and at the same time just knowing what you said, that there will always be some elements of bypassing, there will always be elements of some masking, will never be perfect. The perfection is the imperfection. So kind of working with that, which makes, for me, like what you said, doing the work, like I was so obsessed with doing the work that it became too much obsession for me, in the sense where I became too addicted to that pain thing, like that pain mechanism of what you were mentioning, that I did a lot of self-violence in the process of it, which made me not like self-violence, like to hurt myself, but just by not respecting my limits, not respecting my boundaries with others, with myself, just saying yes all the time, constantly pleasing, constantly giving, constantly taking on way more than on my plate, the constant, just typical savior martyr thing, and just pretending I'm fine all the time, everything is good. And one thing if goes wrong, or if I do something human, like and people coming after me, criticizing, taking it personally, to like, oh, how can I accept my humanity, I need to be like, So
Yeah.
these are some big ones I work with for my own journey because yeah, yeah, I think this is it. What we've discussed is just more self love, and not self love has also become a very trendy word now, which I
Yeah.
understand. But I never understood like in the depth of like how to do self love. Like self love, okay, self love physically you can do many things, but like in the moments of deep pain, it's like understanding the connection that you need to make to God or what is there with God, instead of a person, and that connection bringing love into you, receiving love from God. Like that's kind of self love. So, but if you're blocked internally to receive love because your whole thing is based around giving love, give unconditional love, that you become blocked from receiving love from the light, right? So that blockage I had to remove, and that's been the spiral that is yeah, it's been a spiral, but it's always like this, like let's say we'll do this conversation 10 years later from now, we will be
Mm.
realizing the same thing just from a more expanded angle. We
Yeah.
will be, we will go into some things, human experiences, and we will live those loops or some patterns or some karmic relationships, whatever, all these things. I mean, everything is karma. Like all relationships are karmic until you have no karma, which is you becoming
Mm.
Buddha. But that's a state that is unlike. It's very rare, That's why we pray Buddha and Jesus, because they're rare states to arrive in.
Yeah.
So we're all just dissolving karma really all the time. Relationships are just reflections of that. So that's how I see it. I see it in that way now, and I find a lot of peace in this way of
Mm.
operating. Yeah.
I really love the way you explained, and then you covered a lot of things, and I think you gave a beautiful summary to the entire episode as well. So it's like the crux of it, because there's no one thing that you're always working on. It's always spiraling. There are topics you're diving deeper into, the realizations that are coming. But what I really picked on here is I really love when you said that allowing yourself to receive love from God instead of being always in the space of giving or thinking you are controlling. Like control is the word I would like to use, because mind loves control, right? So I just
Yeah.
love, and I think I'm gonna take it from here that okay, am I being a receptive vessel to love right now or not? Like that is a very beautiful thing to reflect upon.
I think what helps with this is what helped me through reflection from a teacher is, I was big into killing the ego. I need to kill the ego because this is also something like, you gotta kill the ego. The spiritual part is about killing the ego. He's like, you cannot kill the ego. It's almost impossible. You surrender to ego to God. And I was like, okay. And it was very simple, but it shifted my entire relationship with God. And that surrendering is what breaks you out of the control, and then you open this channel of receiving, and then you realize you're not ever in control, and you see there's a higher state of acceptance. And then this you can do anywhere, all the time, whenever, right? Like surrender, God, okay, connect, and then you come. So it's like that really shifted things for me very deeply. And what I feel this spiritual ego is can really play into all of this, especially for practitioners who have been practicing. And I don't mean spiritual ego in a bad way. Spiritual ego can be very powerful because I mean I've had so many experiences in my life because of spiritual ego, like this, but then it ends up at some point getting you stuck somewhere, and there you stay stuck, and you're not able to overcome something inside you emotionally or fundamentally, not even emotionally, fundamentally you get stuck, and that stuck thing keeps you like in loops in your intimate relationships, in your personal relationships, and something just stays stuck until like this shift happens and surrender happens, and everything changes after that. It's like something opens and energy flows, and then something interesting happens. And this is when I said to you earlier as well, this quote from Ramdas that we're just all guiding one another home. Like it's really just that. Like gurus, we talk about gurus, but I mean real gurus are just doing that, They're just reflecting home. They're not here to teach. They're not here to, teach or preach. Really, they're here to just be in home and reflect that with the other person, because we are just doing that. It's the journey is
Yeah.
that. It's just because now everything is amplified so much because of the information, as you were saying, like since COVID especially, everything became so amplified and everything has just become so exponential that I think for our nervous systems to attune to it has been quite intense.
I don't think we were made to even attune to it. We are just forcing ourselves to attune to it. It's that crazy amount of information.
Yeah, but the thing is, like, when you are expanding consciously, like what you were saying, consciousness, like, let's say you're expanding a lot consciousness wise, and you're an empath or whatever, labels. You're feeling one root, but then you start feeling everything, man. And that is like heavy. That's why most people, what you were saying, that most people are really in freeze these days. I think it's because of that. Because they expanded and then they felt everything and they were like, fuck no.
Yeah.
This when like nervous system shut down. Right? And for people who have had to, let's say, who have had the taste of God like deeply, they cannot shut down anymore. Right? They cannot shut down. What you're saying, they will have to do the work. It's like the only way to kind of attune to this expanded collective or amplified is you connect with God. You become transmitting, you become vessels so that nothing kind of gets to you anymore. This is the only way, is what I realized. Because it's like your energy has to be in center or you will feel things. Because you've already expanded. Your nervous system is already transmitting, is what I realized. Like people's consciousness, they've done ayahuasca ceremonies, they've done vipassanas, they've done all these things. After doing all these things, you cannot forget. You cannot like go back to what you were before. So either you will jump into the spiritual ego wagon, or you will escape into like little things, or you will go into the freeze model, which is very hard for somebody who's already awakened in some ways. So their nervous system, I think the key right now is just regulating the nervous system. Is what I realized. Like what you said, grounding, rooting. In the coming times, like it's not about going very high with practices, because we have done that like a lot. It's really, even with plant medicines, shamans and masters who are bringing people in and grounding them, like that's the key. I really feel that even the practices I am doing more or less now is just around grounding primarily. Yeah. And even though I move a lot physically, but it's not about that, because I think the way world is evolving, climate change wise and all of that, we may have to live that way. That we may have to keep on moving physically, that will happen, but that doesn't mean we cannot be grounded internally. So we need to ground our Muladhara chakras, we need to do these practices. And I think ancient wisdom has a lot to share and in all of this. So body
I think
practice.
all ancient wisdom has all to share. I don't think we were supposed to go all the way. No, we were maybe supposed to go, but it's like we are again spiraling back with scientific evidences and everything. We are again coming back to very similar things, right? So it's beautiful, and I think it's always a reaffirmation. Anyone I have a word with, specifically post COVID, grounding is the key right now. Like ground yourself, come back to where you are, be as you are, and all of those words. So I think it really resonates with and with everyone, even if you are stressed, even if you have done heightened spiritual practices, or if you've had certain spiritual experiences, I think the fear or the thing comes up. It's very common for people to go through some intense experiences, and I think this is again other side of trauma. When someone all of a sudden experiences, let us say, Kundalini awakening or something like that, but since their nervous system was not so grounded, that experience can also be traumatic, right?
I mean, that's what's happening. So that is majorly what has happened, because people went into spirituality like full power, and I've done this. But thankfully, over the years, I've also been able to take time to integrate and ground. So integration and embodiment part is so important. And before integration and embodiment happens, people are already chasing another experience. So spirituality as a industry, it's become an industry, right? So this industry has become a chasing stream, and I don't think that is one part of the equation. But integration and embodiment, without it, then there's no point, because then you start having ailments in your body. And I've had it, I've been through it. So that's why I've understood, like, especially with Kundalini energies, I mean, everybody's just awakening, man, like crazy, and the vessels are not ready. So we need to keep the vessels intact. We need to, the diet and the lifestyle, like, it's all, it's a proper, it's like wholesome. It cannot be just one thing and then whoosh. Everybody's shooting up, it's like rockets are going up and they're not landing. It's like coming like this and whoosh, whoosh. So that's where I see things have gone a bit haywire.